There. Good morning, Representative Jack Ducharme, representing House District 111, which is Madison, Norridgewock, and Solon.
Representative Cloutier.
Good morning, everyone. I am Kristen Cloutier. I represent House District 60, which is part of my hometown of Lewiston.
Representative Arata. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Amy Arata. I represent House District 65, which includes New Gloucester and part of Poland.
Representative Fay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Fay, and I represent House District 66, which is the other part of Poland, parts of Raymond and Casco.
Representative Millett.
Good morning, everyone. Solon North, House District 71, towns of Norwich, Sweden, Waterford, and West Paris.
I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from Representative Millett because maybe Senator Davis's mic is on. So we'll just have to be careful about that so we don't have that echo. Representative Hymanson.
Good morning. I'm Patty Hymanson. I represent House District 4, which is parts of York, Wells, Sanford, and all of Ogunquit.
Great. And Senator Bailey.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Donna Bailey. I represent Senate District 31, which is Hollis, Leamington, part of Buxton, Old Orchard Beach, and Saco.
Senator Davis.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Davis, and I represent Senate District 4, which is all of Piscataquis County, parts of Somerset and Penobscot.
And my co-chair, Representative Peirce.
Good morning, I'm Teresa Peirce. I represent the majority of Falmouth, House District 44, and I'm happy to serve as the co-chair of AFA. I'm also having a decent amount of internet issue, and I might turn my video off, but I'd still like to be named a host of the meeting so I could be helpful if I need to be. I say that to Maureen and Judith. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And my name is Kathy Breen. I represent 6.5 communities in Cumberland County in the Maine Senate, and I serve as Senate Chair of Appropriations. And I'm going to be very transparent. I'm rusty. I haven't done this in a while, and there are some updates to Zoom, and we have a new clerk. I want to welcome Judith Hannum, who's our new appropriations clerk. She's had extensive training, and she has help in the office today from the wonderful Mandy, of course. But I would just ask all the members and also members of the public to be patient as my co-chair and I warm up to the Zoom format again, and we work with our new clerk, who is doing her first meeting on Zoom for our committee today. So just a note again about our agenda, we do have 3 public hearings on 3 bills. These are bills that were submitted in the last session and carried over last year, I should say, in the first year of the session, and were carried over and have not had public hearings. So we're doing those public hearings today. And we are scheduled to have a briefing from MEPERS, the retirement system, and the new executive there. There's a chance that we will have to take a break, and because MEPERS folks have another commitment in another committee today. So depending on how long our public hearings go, we might bump up to a conflict and have to let them go to the other committee and then come back to us. So we don't know yet how that's going to roll out. Depends on what kind of input we have today on the 3 bills that we have for public hearing. Maureen did send the information to everybody for MEPERS, and for the public, if you go on Maine legislature and you go to the Appropriations Committee, you will see our agenda for today and the documents. You can get to the bills as well as the testimony and what we will be looking at today. And here is our wonderful analyst, Maureen Dawson, which means she probably has something constructive to add.
Just to say that we won't post the main MEPERS briefing until they begin, just in case it gets postponed or something.
Okay.
So for the
Yeah,
public.
there's a small chance it won't happen at all today and will get postponed to a different day. We're hoping to avoid that, but that's why
as soon as they begin, Mandy will be posting it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maureen. So before we get started, I assume I'm not the only rusty one in the bunch. So are there any questions before we get going from any of our members? All right. Well, as usual, use your raise hand function if you do want to say something. And if I somehow overlook that, just shout out my name and we will get you what you need. Representative Hymanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that some of us have to go for testimony. So if we leave the meeting, then we'll be back.
Very good. Yes, I have a bill myself at 1 o'clock, so we'll have to see how that goes. And other members certainly have bills in other committees as well. So folks will be popping in and out. Thank you for that reminder. Anything else before we get started? All right. So our first public hearing is on, let me just get back to my screen that has it. It's a little bit of a loading delay. It's LD 327, and we have Representative Jeff Hanley of Pittston here to present the bill. And Judith, are you going to admit him? Or, oh, there's Representative Martin. Representative Martin, you want to introduce yourself before we get started?
Sure. Good morning. John Martin, House District 151.
Welcome. Looks like our clerk has moved Representative Hanley into the panel. Yes, Representative Peirce.
I just let you know that I did it. So he's.
Oh, you did it.
Now.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Playing along at home, train.
I appreciate that. Representative Hanley, let's see your smiling face. There he is. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. You brought up the issue of being rusty, I think. I always thought we were a well-oiled machine here, but I'm a little rusty too. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Good, good. Are you ready to listen to my testimony?
The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to go to another screen to read my testimony, so I will not be seeing you, but you will be seeing me.
Very good.
Will that be okay?
Sure thing.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Appropriations and Financial Affairs. I am State Representative Jeff Hanley, and I proudly represent District 87, which includes the towns of Alna, Pittston, Randolph, and Wiscasset. It is an honor to appear before you today for the purpose of introducing LD 327, an act to return the surplus money to Maine taxpayers. The state of Maine has collected way too much money from our good taxpayers. And this tells me that our tax rates are much too high. Whether it is the income, sales, fuel, or business rates is not the issue of this legislation. This legislation seeks to address. Our people now face a CPI, Consumer Price Index of 6.7%. Thus, I don't think anyone here hearing this can argue that point. A few things to illustrate my concerns. Gas for the family car is $3.49 a gallon, up from $1.20 from a year ago. Heating oil in October of 2020 was $2.13 a gallon, is now $3.35 a gallon, up $1.22. Bearing in mind that 60% of all homes heat with oil. And diesel fuel in January of 2021 was $2.71 a gallon. Now is $3.61 a gallon, up $1.10. Everything in Maine gets here by diesel truck, everything. So I went grocery shopping with my wife last week, and you don't need to be in the store very long to notice the cost of everything has gone up. Moreover, starting in January 1 of this year, electricity is going to be going up 50 to 80%. I think I've made my point. The cost of living in Maine is high and getting higher. We have collected a huge surplus, and the very word surplus tells us the state does not need it. This money belongs to the people, not to the state. So let's give it back by enacting this bill. As you read the summary of this bill on the in the document before you, item 1, we want to pay all our bills first. All our obligations have to be taken care of. I don't seek to interrupt that process at all with this bill. But I do want to change my initial intent rate of 75% to 90% of the surplus money to be returned to the citizens and 10% to the rainy day fund. I want every person in the state to receive part of the surplus. Every wage earner, every stay-at-home mom or dad, every veteran, every retiree. I do not want to leave anyone out of this give back. All of the people of Maine pay taxes of some type. They all need to receive a refund. To determine this refund for wage earners, using the latest tax returns, create a formula in proportion to the taxes that they paid in. All other groups could receive a refund on a per person scale. The important thing is to get this money out of the reach of state government and into the pockets of the people. It'll be a boost to their budget, and it'll go right back into our economy. I am confident that this committee, using this framework, can get this surplus back to where it belongs. I thank you for your time, and I will be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Hanley. I just wanted to give a heads up to Senator Stewart that he will be next in the queue. But before that, I would ask if there are any questions from the committee for the bill sponsor, Representative Hanley. I am not seeing any hands up.
Very good.
So I will say that we probably don't have any questions, and we thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you for hearing my well-oiled presentation.
We appreciate that. Senator Stewart, you are next. And then after that, we will have Treasurer Beck. The floor is yours, Senator Stewart.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's good to see you all this morning. Hope everybody's doing well and staying warm. With that, I'll jump into my testimony. Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Appropriations and Financial Affairs. I'm Senator Trey Stewart, and I have the honor of representing 51 communities in Aroostook and Penobscot counties. And I'm here before you today to present testimony in support of LD 327, an act to return surplus money to Maine taxpayers. When I began serving in Augusta in 2017, the state budget was $7.8 billion. This past summer, a state budget of $8.5 billion was passed, and just this last year, taxpayers have footed the bill for an additional $1.1 billion billion more than what was expected. Sorry. Rather than supplementing shortfalls in our state budget, that money is creating new government-run programs. If you ask a constituent at the grocery store whether they wanted an additional $1.1 billion to go to a new government program or to go back to the family's budget to offset the increasing costs of virtually everything, my guess is that they will want it back. Mainers work hard for their money and don't ask for much in return. But at some point, they are going to say enough is enough. I believe it's long past time that we return surplus dollars to our constituents, and that's exactly what LD 327 proposes. This bill would place enough money in the general fund to cover outstanding obligations required by the state and transfer, well, according to the sponsors, looks like an amendment, 10% of the remaining shortfall funds, of the remaining funds to the budget stabilization fund to save for when the state's revenues may fall short. This is a prudent measure that would ensure we are always looking ahead to the future, regardless of who is in office. The remaining 90% of funds would be distributed back to Maine taxpayers, which would help not only those who need it most, but our economy as a whole. Again, we are in a position where the state has significantly more money on hand than it needs. And it is time that we make our constituents and their budgets a priority. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Any questions for Senator Stewart? Not seeing any. Thank you for joining us today. Treasurer Beck let me know that he's actually not here for this bill, so we're going to wait on him. In the meantime, I would ask the folks who are in attendance to raise your hand if you are here to testify in support of the bill we're hearing right now, LD 327. Okay, I see Nick Murray. I'm going to move you over to the panel now. There you are. I see your square.
Oh, man.
I hear your voice, but I don't see your pic. There you are.
Hello, good morning.
Welcome. The floor is yours.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, and distinguished members of AFA, Appropriations and Financial Affairs. It's good to be back. My name's Nick Murray. I'm the policy analyst with Maine Policy Institute. We're a nonprofit that works on the state level and it informs policymakers to make policies that are pro-individual liberty and getting government out of the way for folks so they can choose their own path. So I submitted my testimony this morning. It was written yesterday, and I realized I have to make a correction. The current inflation rate is nearing 7%, and that is the highest annual CPI number since 1982. That brings us to a 4-decade record inflation, not 3 decades. Just to clarify that. So just to put in perspective the impact of inflation on the average U.S. household, an analysis from the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School found that inflation will cost the average U.S. household $3,500 in higher prices over 2021. And they say that lower income households will have to spend about 7% more, while higher income households will have to spend about 6% more. But inflation also costs more in higher taxes. So according to the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, a 1% increase in inflation would raise income taxes by 1.1%. That means today's 6.8% inflation rate translates to a 7.5% tax increase, which means $1,500 more in tax for that average household. So $3,500 in lost purchasing power plus $1,500 in higher taxes because of inflation means that the hidden tax of inflation for the average American household is $5,000 over last year, and that's not getting any better. So that we support this bill. It's a great idea. I think there's a lot of ways to make the excess revenue cascade work directly for the most needy Mainers. I put some ideas in my testimony, but I think that we'll hear a lot of proposals to maybe beef up tax credits or specific state programs, and we don't think that's the way to go. We think that every cent of this money in this cascade can go directly towards paying down tax rates, specifically for consumption taxes like the fuel tax, the sales tax, and the service provider tax, which clearly hit folks more who who use more of their income for discretionary spending, or for spending on essentials like food and fuel and things. So by doing this, we can build in stability to the economy. So if Mainers know that excess revenues mean a tax cut is coming on essential goods, they can be more confident in starting a new enterprise, maybe jumping over to a new career, buying a new house, or starting a new family, just to have that stability to know that the state is working to keep prices of goods lower, or at least get money back into folks' pockets in the event that there are excess revenues. So the service provider tax, for instance, brings in less than $110 million over the biennium, but it levies a higher rate than the sales tax, as you know, and it's only on those select services like telecommunications that folks think about, but it's also for those DHHS licensed home care and mental health services. So thinking that, because it's such a low amount compared to the state, how much the state brings in for sales tax and income tax, this cascade can essentially pay that entire service provider tax down. Maybe you can move things over to the sales tax, lowering rates and getting some of these things out from under a higher tax rate is going to help those folks who are spending more of that income on those home care and those services. So I might offer that as an idea. In terms of fuel taxes, maybe the cascade after paying a portion of the service provider tax goes to pay down the fuel tax. 2018 analysis commissioned by the Office of the Public Advocate found that for lower income households, the burden of energy costs is triple that of the average household. And that can be as high as 27% in Hancock and Somerset County for low income households. The average is 18% for low income. And just lastly, it's important to note this bill would cost the state nothing because it would only be triggered in the event that revenues exceed appropriations. And I completely agree with Representative Hanley's assertion that the people should be the ones who decide where this money is ultimately spent. They will spend it more wisely than state government, with all due respect. And so we look forward to working with the committee on this important idea, getting that money back into the hands of Maine people and helping them grow the economy in the process. So thanks. We urge your support for this bill, and I'm glad to help out in any way that I can.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Murray from folks on the committee? Representative Millett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Murray, for your testimony. Will you be presenting to the committee some statutory language that would amend the cascade to focus on those consumption tax rates that you mentioned? Right now, as you know, this is a concept draft. The sponsors have referenced a way of putting that money back in lieu of the current cascade, but it would be helpful if we could see draft language, perhaps from you and also from the sponsors when we work the bill. Is that
absolutely
your plan?
Yes, I'd be glad to help draft some language.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Murray? All right, I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of LD 327 rather? I don't see any hands up. Okay, anyone here to speak in opposition to LD 327? If you would put your hand up, please, in the attendee list. Okay, I have two folks I'm going to let in at the same time, Adam Zuckerman and Sarah Austin. And Adam, I'm going to have you speak first, and then Sarah, I will have you go afterwards. So bear with me as I move you over into the panel. All right, Mr. Zuckerman, I think we have you, and we have Ms. Austin standing by. So the floor is yours, Adam.
Fantastic, thank you. It's good to be with you again. Good morning, Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Appropriations and Financial Affairs. My name is Adam Zuckerman, and I'm the lobbyist for the Maine People's Alliance. Our 32,000 members stretch from Kittery to Fort Kent. We are committed to creating a state of Maine where everyone has what they need, everyone contributes what they can, and no one is left behind. That's why I feel compelled to testify today against LD 327, Representative Hanley's act to return surplus money to Maine taxpayers. Our state is in the midst of an unprecedented economic and public health crisis that has revealed how fragile and grossly underfunded our state's social safety net is. Never before has the need to invest in universal affordable childcare been more clear. Never before have we seen so many Mainers struggle to afford housing. Never before have we recognized the critical role that our direct care workers and other essential workers play. Never before have we truly appreciated how denying healthcare to any of us, documented or undocumented, threatens us all. Never before have we so viscerally understood the life and death need to invest in recovery for Mainers struggling with substance use disorder. Our state government was already pushed to the limit before COVID. That was the direct result of policies like LD 327. Governor LePage and his allies spent 8 years deliberately slashing essential public programs to give tax breaks to the wealthy. They decimated the very programs that would have allowed us to respond to this crisis. We have not come close to recovering from that deliberate disinvestment, let alone from COVID. This year's revenue forecast shows that during COVID, the wealthiest Mainers have seen their income nearly double. And now, in the middle of a crisis, we're talking about wasting the funds we need to recover to give them even more tax breaks. Let's make a deal. When every Mainer has access to affordable healthcare, childcare, housing, and drug treatment, when our direct service workers are valued for the critical work that they do, and when no more Mainers are going hungry, then we can talk about giving more tax breaks to the wealthy. Until then, let's get back to trying to steer our state through a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Zuckerman from anyone on the committee? Representative Millet.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerman. I wondered if you would share with us what your definition or interpretation of surplus money is. The way this concept draft is focused, it deals with what is collected through the end of the fiscal year and reserved under the cascade for redistribution. Are you at all thinking about the current revenue forecast of the 822 million that was recommended from the Revenue Forecasting Committee in December, or are you focused on the cascade as the sponsor and the proponents seem to be?
That's a good question, and thank you, Representative Millet. Focused primarily on the forecast from December, the 822 million. And I know that that amount is a somewhat conservative estimate because it doesn't take into account potential additional federal funds like funding from Build Back Better.
So if I might just follow up, Adam, the assumption is that we will have a supplemental budget from the chief executive within the month, and that we will address the issue that you just focused on in ways that seem to be acceptable to the legislature in the majority. And then at the end of the fiscal year in July, the controller and the treasurer and others who track the money will look at the new forecast in March and what has been spent of the appropriated monies updated through a supplemental, and then apportion the money at the end of July. So I'm curious as to whether or not you're seeing the cascade approach as a continuation of, as you described it, the LePage years, or attempts to disinvest in people programs, since it would only follow after the budget had been updated by the legislature itself.
So thank you, Representative Millet. I haven't looked into the cascade approach. I know that Sarah is more of the economist, so I think she'd be able to address more of the technical aspects of that approach.
Any other questions for Mr. Zuckerman? All right, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Sarah Austin with the Maine Economic, oh, I'm messing it up. I'm gonna let you say it so I don't mess it up.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Breen, and Representative Peirce and other members of the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee. My name is Sarah Austin. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the Maine Center for Economic Policy. It's a mouthful. I am here to testify against LD 327. This is a concept draft, and I apologize if there's an updated amendment that I wasn't able to see, but it would replace the existing cascade and mandate. As I understood, 3/4 of all revenues that exceeded budgeted expenses be distributed in equal payment, and the remaining quarter go to the Budget Stabilization Fund. And we're opposing this bill because pooled resources from our tax code are powerful tools to solve problems that stand in the way of our shared prosperity as a state. Blanket giveaways of revenues as proposed in this bill dismiss the unequal footing that Maine families and businesses have in this economy right now, and squanders opportunities to use these resources to address the specific problems that are holding some groups back from success. The pandemic has supercharged inequality and concentrated wealth. This has been a topic of many headlines over the past few years, as we are seeing more data to affirm this. Wealthier workers were more likely to keep their jobs and be allowed to work from the safety of their home, and in sectors with high wage jobs, we've seen fully recovered from pre-pandemic employment levels here in Maine. At the same time, large corporations were more likely to have cash on hand to make it through the lockdown, and also the connections needed to quickly cash in on government assistance that helped keep them afloat. And we're seeing strong profits from corporations that have not only padded their own profits, but the incomes of the wealthiest households that own the biggest parts of the stock market. And while this has represented a huge increase in inequality, both in Maine and across the country, ironically, this has helped boost revenues in states like Maine and others across the state, where these wealthier individuals and also corporations pay higher tax rates. At the same time, we've seen that workers in high COVID risk industries were the ones that are more likely to be Mainers of color experiencing poverty. Low wage sectors in Maine have experienced the biggest layoffs, have been the slowest to recover, and are the furthest from pre-pandemic employment. And these cash-strapped households are struggling the most with skyrocketing housing costs and increasing prices on food, fuel, and other goods. So while we recognize that getting cash to people is an important tool to help households make it through tough times, in the climate that we're in, where many households are actually doing incredibly well and others are suffering greatly, it just doesn't make sense to give a blanket giveaway that's an equal amount to every household. It's important for policies to be targeted so that they are able to do the most good for the households that really need it, and a equal payment to every household really compromises the state's ability to best invest those dollars. So expanding refundable state income tax credits like the sales tax fairness credit, the earned income tax credit, and the property tax fairness credit, these help get cash into the hands of families that are struggling most with the high cost of living, especially as we're seeing inflation increase sales tax receipts across the state. Something like boosting the sales tax fairness makes a lot of sense to help offset those costs for low-income households. So these kinds of proposals also cost less, which would allow for more cash to get into the households of greatest need by either boosting the benefit for low-income households or by allowing, it could allow for more money to be set aside for other programs. So I understand this is going through the cascade as proposed. So what doesn't go into some sort of policy like this, if the committee does go forward with it, goes into the budget stabilization fund or other funds in the cascade. But we also know, as revenues have been quite volatile, it's still really important for the state to be prioritizing the budget stabilization fund as a way to prevent cuts in the future that are really harmful for low-income households. So as this committee considers efforts to help families struggling right now with price increases and accessing the essentials of housing and childcare, we urge you to target efforts to households that are struggling the most. This not only ensures that the policies have the greatest impact, but helps the resources go farther to tackle more of the issues that are facing households and businesses. So thank you all so much for your time this morning. This is my first testimony of the year, and I am very happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Austin. Any questions from the committee for Ms. Austin? Representative Millett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for asking the only one to be asking
That's what we're here for.
However, I wonder, Ms. Austin, if you would follow through on my question to Nick Murray earlier and give some thought to putting in statutory, or at least draft statutory form, the ideas that you've advanced in your testimony for the work session. And secondly, I'd like your economic assumption that lay behind your comment on the volatility of revenues. You're involved in some of these activities leading to forecasts. So do you see the 822 million as evidence of a growing state economy? Is it partially one time? Is it, and how would you describe the volatility that you used in your comments, if you might? And again, I'm not looking for hard answers today. I'm looking for help with us when we get to the work session.
Sure. I can definitely help with some drafting ideas for getting credits into a cascade type policy. I also would say on the volatility side, we have seen a big adjustment to the economic forecast, both in terms of income. Well, I would say mostly in terms of income that affects wages and also the sales tax revenue forecast. And those seem to be pretty stable in terms of a lot of people are seeing wage increases right now, whether it's because of the tight labor market. So that is a baseline amount that will be growing and might grow slower in future years, but that seems to be a baseline adjustment up. The volatility, which I think Dr. Allen spoke to this at his last presentation to this committee, really is about high wealth households and big corporations in terms of how much of the huge adjustment in corporate revenues that we've seen is here to stay. That's a question, and things like capital gains are much more volatile. But I think you would have to ask Dr. Allen, but I think the revenue forecast does make assumptions that those are phased out in future years. So a big portion of the forecast is these more stable sources that are a baseline increases in total wages in the state that affect sales and income taxes. So if that doesn't mean all of it is necessarily here to stay, but a decent portion of that seems to be an adjustment to the baseline that we should be able to see into the future. But there are unforeseen circumstances. We are in the middle of a pandemic that no one could have predicted 3 years ago, and that had a huge impact on our labor market. So any revenue forecast is going to have some volatility or risk associated with it. It is only a forecast after all, but I do think a decent chunk of the forecasted revenues that we're seeing is an adjustment to the baseline that we should be able to expect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, can you just remind the committee of your position on the, you're on the consensus economic forecasting?
That's right. Yeah, so I think there are 4 others of us that sit on that, and we're staffed by the state economist to do the economic forecast that is used to then create the revenue forecast.
Thank you for that reminder. Any other questions for Ms. Austin? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in the attendee list that's here to testify on LD 327? I don't see anyone. So I think we're done. So I'm going to close the public hearing for LD 327. And we're going to move on to LD 329, which is Bill. Lead sponsor is Representative Harnett, who I understand from Representative Cardone is under the weather today, and Representative Cardone is going to present the bill on his behalf. So Representative Cardone, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, to my colleagues on AFA, I received word from Representative Harnett this morning that he is under the weather and not able to present. So he has asked me to read his testimony to you so that it can be read publicly today. Unfortunately, I am not going to be able to answer any questions that you may have about the bill, but Representative Harnett did want you to know that he will be available for a work session. So if you have questions specifically for him, please hold them for the work session. And he has submitted this testimony publicly, as in writing as well, so that you can reference it. Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, and esteemed colleagues of the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee. My name is Tom Harnett, and I represent the residents of District 83, which includes the towns of Farmingdale and the city of Gardner. I'm here today to introduce LD 329, an act to amend the laws governing the issuance of bonds. LD 329 would require the governor to issue a general obligation bond that has been ratified by the voters of Maine unless one of the following 5 specific conditions are met. Number 1, the state treasurer determines that the debt service on the bond would be greater than the amount budgeted. Number 2, the state treasurer determines that the issuance of the bonds will adversely affect the credit rating of the state. Number 3, the state treasurer determines that a delay in the issuance of the bonds would likely result in a more financially advantageous interest rate. Number 4, the governor receives notification that a project for which the bond was authorized is not going forward, and the funding to be provided by the bond is not required. Or, number 5, the governor receives notification that alternative funding sources are available to implement within a comparable time frame a project and the purposes for which the bond was authorized and ratified. Should the governor delay or forego issuance of a bond, this bill requires them to immediately notify the presiding officers and majority and minority leaders of the Senate and the House of Representatives. It also requires the governor to disclose the extent of the delay and the effect of the delay or non-issuance on the project and purposes of the bond. In the past, a prior chief executive declined to perform a ceremonial and ministerial act affixing his signature to a bond. That inaction tipped the delicate balance between our co-equal branches of government and effectively blocked the issuance of bonds and overturned the will of the legislature as had been approved by the people of Maine at the ballot box. This bill seeks to prevent this from happening again. If this bill is enacted, the governor will still have ample legitimate ways to influence the process, the use of the veto being the principal one. Finally, LD 329 removes the requirement that bonds must bear the facsimile signature of the governor. Current law requires signatures from both the governor and the state treasurer or the treasurer's deputy. Thank you for your time and consideration, and please hold your questions for Representative Harnett.
Thank you, Representative Cardone. It looks like we have Douglas Rooks with his hand up here to speak on this bill, so I'm going to move him over. Treasurer Beck, if you want to speak on this bill, I would request that you put your hand up. So I'm going to move Mr. Rooks over now to the panel. Good morning, Mr. Rooks.
Good morning.
We have your voice, but not your picture. Would you like to put your picture on?
Yes, I think I have the video thing down here too. Okay. All right, there we are.
Wonderful. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, this is also my first testimony of this session. Might be the last, unlike a lot of people who appear before you. But anyway, I did hear also from Representative Harnett this morning he would not be able to attend. And although I certainly would never attempt to speak for Representative Harnett, we have worked together on this bill, so I might be able to help with some of the questions that might come up. Also, I would refer you to the testimony of Charles Jacobs, who is also in favor of the bill and also couldn't be here today. He has pre-filed his testimony, I believe, as well. Senator Breen, Representative Pierce, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. I am pleased to offer testimony in support of LD 329, which I believe would restore the process by which Maine issues general obligation bonds to the terms the Maine Constitution requires and what the voters rightly expect. Maine has an unusual bonding process divided between the legislative and executive branches. The state treasurer's office and the legislative branch has constitutional duties to oversee and protect the state's finances, especially concerning debt. Executive agencies have the authority and responsibility to carry out the programs traditionally supported by general fund bond issues. Until the previous administration, which served from 2011 to 2019, informal cooperation between the branches sufficed. The statutes require the signatures of both the treasurer and the governor for bonds to be lawfully issued. By withholding his signature, the governor effectively canceled the bonds, upending the Constitution's prescribed process and frustrating the will of the voters who had approved them through a statewide referendum. Given this history, it is incumbent on this legislature to restore the process to its original form. One section of the bill prescribes 5 specific reasons a governor may defer issuance of a bond to allow necessary discretion. Another removes the requirement for the governor's signature, which is not necessary for any constitutional purpose. I would point out that the treasurer's signature must still be attested by the Commissioner of Administrative and Financial Services, ensuring that cooperation between the two branches continues. Other statutory language already requires the treasurer and the commissioner to act jointly in analyzing and reporting on Maine's bonded indebtedness. LD 329 would create predictability and restore public confidence in the bonding process. I urge its support and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Rooks? Pardon my barking dog. I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your testimony today. We appreciate it. I think Treasurer Beck is here to speak neither for nor against, so I will bring Treasurer Beck in now.
Good morning, Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, members of the committee. I'm State Treasurer Henry Beck. I am here to testify neither for nor against this bill and also a similar bill brought by Senator Mearmont. Testifying neither for nor against, but have to very much stress, certainly support the intent and spirit of the proposals. Certainly, value, I think, like the sponsors and almost everyone, to the will of voters that's expressed through approval of a bond. But today I'll try to limit my comments to be helpful to you by offering some sort of just practical and market information. First of all, from the outset, it is important for our reputation in the market that we conduct our sales with some dependability, and it's an axiom of finance that investors don't like risk unless they can have an incentive otherwise. And so if a governor or treasurer or whoever used a statute at the last minute to stop a bond sale that had been essentially previously approved and negotiated, that's certainly bad for our reputation. I don't want to overstate that risk, but it certainly exists. The fact of the matter is, though, that throughout the process, cooperation between a governor and a treasurer is just essential. And so to successfully close a sale, I mean, you need logistical assistance, financial orders, disclosure preparation, and in fact, signatures, not just from the governor and DAF's commissioner, but any number of employees that report to the governor. And so I say all that to share, it'd be difficult to craft statute that effectively mandates a sale that for whatever reason is just strongly opposed by a governor. I suppose you could construe some of the language in the proposal about authorizing to mean that authorizing, but I don't want to offer too much legal analysis there. Also important to note that you'll need the cooperation from the governor for legal reasons that exist outside of Maine law. I mean, specifically for federal anti-fraud statutes on our disclosure statements, we will need the cooperation and signature and assurance from the controller and the state economist and others. I guess my point being, I don't want to give advice to a governor opposed, but a governor would be entitled and be able, I suppose, to stop that process if that governor desired. You also don't want a situation where, you know, by the language of this bill, a governor who's opposed to a sale is essentially required, and then an oppositional governor uses the post-sale process and construction process to halt the project, because that would have adverse tax consequences. In my testimony, just if you care to look, I've actually enclosed a copy of the bonds as they're understood in this section of law that require that signature. The originals of these bonds remain with the Depository Trust Company, used to be in Lower Manhattan, and after Hurricane Sandy had to be moved across the river. That's where our bonds exist. Also enclosed, I'll note, one way to address this issue perhaps is that when bond proposals come to your committee and then go to the House and Senate, often includes language that the sale will be conducted as directed by the governor. If that language is removed, it might be helpful in signaling your intent for a post-ratification sale. We'll also note, as Mr. Brooks said, you know, if you in fact did remove that specific requirement for a governor's signature on those final documents, despite what I've said about other ways to stop a sale, that would be okay from a market and legal perspective, if the committee was interested in sort of sending a signal or making some statutory change. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee for Treasurer Beck? Representative Hymanson.
Thank you. I'm interested in this issue. I haven't thought deeply about it, but the fact that a bond that's voted on by people could be stopped was concerning to me. So I just wanted to, so I'm learning about this. And I wondered if you had testimony that was written that puts what you just said into something I can read and deliberate.
Sure, there should be written testimony submitted, I hope, on the portal.
Okay. All right, and it fully explains all the issues that you brought up.
Well, not much more than my verbal comments today. I mean, to summarize my testimony, we support the spirit of the bill for the reasons you've expressed. It's unfortunate, and it's actually bad for our market reputation that if voters approve a bond and we begin a sale, a negotiation for it just to be stopped, with what some might think of as technicality, but in effect, it's practically very difficult. If a governor just simply strongly opposes a sale, a governor could certainly find ways to stop that sale. And so in some ways, this may be a political problem without a statutory remedy. But if the committee is interested in sending a signal and doing something, you certainly could remove that specific requirement about a governor's signature on the bond closing documents. And it was those documents, without relitigating it, that were used to temporarily halt the sale some years ago.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Treasurer Beck? Representative Millett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Treasurer Beck, when you use the word temporarily halt, could you give us a little bit of a historical translation of what did happen, and was a bond approved by the voters and thereby authorized and ready for issuance was permanently prevented from being issued?
I can't speak to say that's ever happened on a permanent basis. And I know, I think what most people know from press accounts, I wasn't there, but there have been situations, as we know, where a sale was nearly completed and negotiated, and an executive declined initially to sign certain closing documents. That was problematic. It was resolved, and it was something we considered for our next sale, which was my first sale. And so, as I said, I don't want to overstate the possibility of damage to reputation, but it's just it's not ideal, no way to run things if we can avoid it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our treasurer? All right, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for joining us today. I don't see any other folks here in attendance to testify on LD 329. So I'm going to close the public hearing right now for LD 329. And the next bill on our schedule is LD 339, and the lead sponsor is Senator Dave Miramont. I don't see Senator Miramont in attendance. So I have reached out to him. Patrick has reached out to him, but he is not here. So I'm gonna request that we take a recess. And also Maureen has let me know that the Maine retirement system folks started their presentation to Labor and Housing about 10 minutes ago. She has asked for an estimate of how long they think they will be there, but I don't think she has an answer yet. So it's 11 o'clock now. I'm going to suggest, wait, I see Maureen coming on. Maybe she has some more concrete information.
I'm here to tell you I have no more concrete information. I thought you should hear that in person. So they don't have a real estimate. I'm guessing just from what she described, Kathy Moran of the MEPERS described as what they have to do, that noon would be a safe guess, and that's still just a guess. If you want to stand down until then or reschedule, that of course is your prerogative.
I think I'd like to recess until 12 o'clock. And hopefully they will be available by then or shortly thereafter, and keep going. So folks can take a break now, get something to eat, whatever you might need, and we will reconvene. We'll have our clerk post a notice that we are recessed until noon and that we'll be back. So I would suggest folks certainly leave your machine on mute, and you could also turn off your video if you like, and we'll reconvene at 12. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I think we'll give a few minutes for committee members to show us they're here if they're on without their video, and give a couple seconds to see if my good co-chair is here as well. Hope everyone had a nice break. Ah, there she is.
All right. Hi, everyone.
I'll turn it back to you. You've done such a great job all day with all my mini problems. So.
Have you finished up in VLA, Representative Peirce?
I have. Did it from my car. It was quite an adventure.
Wow. Well, I have to go to Health and Human Services at 1. So if we're not done by then, I will turn it over to you.
Perfect.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. We are back with appropriations, getting a briefing from the new executive at the Maine State Retirement System. And we have the document. I believe our analyst has posted it. And so folks can follow along if they want by going to the Appropriations Committee and finding the documents there for today.
Seen this, right?
So,
Seen that, right? That's what we're gonna get.
Yeah.
So Dr. Wyke, welcome. And I hope I said your name correctly, and glad to meet you virtually. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I think I can say this now. Good afternoon, Senator Breen, Representative Peirce, and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Wyke, and I'm the new CEO at MEPERS. And because I've only been on the job for 4.5 months, I did bring along some reinforcements. They include Mike Colleran, our Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel, as well as Kathy Morin, who is our Manager of Actuarial and Legislative Affairs. Today, with your indulgence, I'd like to start with a brief update on MEPERS and then take you through the 2021 valuation. And if it's all right, I will share my screen. Been practicing early in the morning because it's intimidating than standing in front of the horseshoe and appropriations is sharing your screen on Zoom. Let's see if I can do it.
Well, as I mentioned to everybody this morning, we're all rusty because it's been months since we had to do this. So take your time and don't worry if there are any hiccups.
So I'm gonna ask Maureen, because the message I'm getting is the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So I'm hoping she can rectify that.
Let me see if maybe I can do that. I don't see that I can.
I'm not the host, but I think that Judith or Mandy can take care of that for you.
It looks like Judith changed it. So you should be able to do it now.
So
great.
Tell me if you're seeing that now.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Take it away.
All right. So the brief update is just to let you know that in the 4 months I've been with MEPERS, one of the things that I started was trying to make sure that I was going to be doing as the new CEO what the Board of Trustees expected of me. And so did some careful listening to them, to the staff, the senior leadership team, as well as met with each of the stakeholders, the major stakeholders for MEPERS, including the employers, as well as the member representatives. And what I'm from that are these goals and objectives, which were adopted by the Board of Trustees in November after sort of a back and forth process during board meetings over a couple of months. And the goals really represent those long-term things on which we have to keep our focus. And so I'll just go through them. Certainly preservation of the trust fund is first and foremost. Stability of the contribution rates is important for both the employers because it impacts their budgets, but also for our members because when budgets get impacted, that sometimes can impact benefits as a reaction. The security and integrity of our information systems. We are in the 21st century. We do much of our work. We are highly dependent upon technology to do it, making sure that those systems function properly, making sure that our assets are secure, and making sure that personal information of our members is not compromised is a high priority for our organization. I'll dwell a little bit on the cultivation of member-centric organization. I think MEPERS does a very good job, and it is filled with good and well-meaning people. I think we do need to modernize our operations. I think we have some data cleanup that needs to happen. I think we need to be offering more services that members can access easily online without having to interact directly with us if that's their preference. But I also think we need to place the member squarely at the center of what we do and make sure that each experience that any member has when they interact with MEPERS is a positive one, and that we have done our job to educate them so that when they get to retirement, they are in a place where they feel that they understand what the benefit is that they will be receiving and that it will work for their lifestyles. And then development of stakeholder relations. This is a continuation, but we have many partners upon which we have relationships that define how well we are performing, either from an employer perspective or an employee perspective, or from the perspective of a public instrumentality that is accountable to you. And so keeping that in the forefront is also critical. And then there are a number of legislative priorities that have come up, and we need to keep our focus on those in the short term. The first one, planning for the post-2028 full funding of the unfunded liability. It's important because we have a study that relates to a potential public pension plan that includes an option based on Social Security that would be funded after the post-2028 full funding. But regardless of whether that pension plan comes into being, we are approaching being a fully mature plan where we would be fully funded, where the number of members that we have in pay are going to be greater than the number of active members making contributions into the plan. And that really requires that we be on a pathway to de-risk the plan before we get to 2028, so that we know we have a secure plan and preserve the trust fund moving forward. In last session, the legislature passed divestment legislation, and it represents a significant amount of work, and we have begun that process. But I think it will be a process that will be ongoing for years to come as we work to try and find some harmony between the tension of the fiduciary responsibility of the Constitution and the requirements of the law. Our department legislation proposes the expansion of the availability of defined contribution plans to school districts so that teachers may participate. Certainly school districts have some arrangements they have made on their own, but we believe we have a superior product that we are currently using with the participating local districts. And we would like to be able to offer that to the school districts as well. And then finally, the disability retirement legislation that passed last year also includes a study that requires us to look at mandatory long-term disability insurance coverage, which would fill a significant gap that currently exists within the benefits that we offer to employees. So those are more short-term things that are largely driven by legislative or logistical priorities that we will be focused on in years to come. So thank you for indulging me on that. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but I can also dive right into the valuation.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so moving into the valuation, I expect that this committee has a good understanding of the unfunded liability, but in the off chance that anybody has some lingering questions, I have become an educator later in my career, so I'm going to try to walk you through the schematic to see if that clears up anything for you. So this is a schematic of how public pension plans work. And you will see on the left-hand side in the blue, two of the inputs to the pension fund, employer contributions and employee contributions. The other input into the fund is in the yellow. It is the earnings on the investments in the fund. There are two outputs from the pension fund, and those are in red at the bottom of the schematic. So certainly the benefits that we pay out to members and their beneficiaries, as well as you will see expenses, which is the cost of the investments and the administration of the plan. The tank that you see, if you consider the whole tank, that represents the total liabilities that we have incurred for the benefits that need to be paid out, not only today, but for employees who are working today into the future in order to honor the promises that we have made as employers. And then the green inside the tank shows what we have built up in assets towards those liabilities. And the difference between the two is what is the unfunded liability. And when we do the annual valuation, that valuation is used to determine how much we need to tweak that valve up on employer contributions in terms of if the contributions remain stable, we can leave the valve where it is. If we need more funds, we're going to have to open that valve up in order to allow more funds to flow in. And so that's why the annual valuation plays a critical role in the work that you do as a committee when it comes to the appropriation of both the normal costs as well as the unfunded liability. So this represents the valuation results for the state teacher plan, and I will walk you through this. As you know, fiscal year 2021 was an exceptional year for investment returns, and that was true for MEPERS as well as pension plans across the country. And if you look at this chart, you will see that down under the market value of assets, our return was 23.7%. So really an excellent year. But by constitution, we do our valuation on an actuarial basis. And that methodology includes a 3-year smoothing that we introduce so that gains and losses are smoothed out over multiple years rather than having to accept that experience all in 1 year. And the actuarial value of assets is 9.9% for fiscal year 21. Still a very good return, and we will continue to reap the benefits over the next few years of fiscal year 2021 because of the smoothing. In July, the Board of Trustees took advantage of these exceptional returns and lowered the discount rate from 6.75% to 6.5%. The discount rate is what we expect to earn on our investments on average going out into the future. The reason you would want to lower the discount rate, even though other costs in the future may rise, is because it de-risks the plan. So we have to take a certain level of risk in order to achieve a certain level of return. And that risk can sometimes work against us if things don't go our way. So as we approach a mature plan that is fully funded and where members in pay outpace the number of active members, de-risking the plan becomes increasingly important in order for us to have a secure trust fund to support the benefits we promised moving forward. I think the most important takeaways for the committee from this valuation are that planned funded level and the employer contribution rates remain stable. So if you look here, you will see on an actuarial basis, the funded ratio was 82.4% last year. With the changes that were recognized in the valuation, including the discount rate, the funded ratio was 82.1%. And the contribution, the total calculated rate in 2020 was 20.15%, and again, fairly stable at 21.72%. This same strong investment return for FY21 drove a 24.1% or $3.7 billion increase in the fiduciary net position of MEPERS. And that is reflected in our audited financial statements, which are also available to the committee. And just to explain sort of where the gains and losses happened that resulted in the current valuation, you will see this chart goes back to 2012. But you'll notice 2021 has an exceptionally large green area and an exceptionally large turquoise area. And the green area represents that gain in assets. The turquoise area really represents the assumption changes as part of the valuation that our actuary carried out. And those assumption changes have two primary drivers. One is the lowering of the discount rate, but the other is the experience study showed that our population is living longer and significantly longer. And because of that, they will be in collection of benefits for a longer period of time. And those two things sandwich a tiny little change in the middle, which is a small liability loss of about 26 million. And when you look at the net of all of this, it's an increase in the unfunded liability of 316 million. So this valuation for 2021 now becomes the starting point for how we set the rates for the FY24 and 25 biennium that you will see as a committee. We take the liabilities as of June 30th, 2021. We go through an actuarial process where we roll those forward to 2022. And we also take the preliminary assets as of June 30th, 2022, and those are used to set the rates. And we'll be doing that work this summer and sharing that information with the Commissioner of DAFs in this committee as you work towards the next biennial budget in the next legislature. Just take a little look back. This should look familiar to some of you. It goes back to 1991, which is coincidentally 1 year after I started working for state government many years ago, and takes you right up to the current valuation of 6/30/2021. The blue or the vertical bars represent the blue portion is the present value of the accrued benefits, and the gray portion is the actuarial liability. And if you look at these horizontal lines, this purple one is the market value of assets, which you can see fluctuates much more than the green line, which is the actuarial value of assets. That's the product of the smoothing. But you can pick out quite clearly here and with the purple market value line, the recession in 2001, 2002. And you can also pick out the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009. And so this actuarial basis helps to smooth that out. It doesn't mean there haven't been challenges in certain years, but that's part of what the process does. Overall, you will see that there has been marked improvement, starting with the constitutional amendment that requires the 1996 UAL be paid off. And overall, this fund has gone from being pretty underfunded to a success story. And nationally, I think we're a bit envied by some of the other public pension plans who are still struggling, probably 10 or 20 years behind where our state teacher plan is. So this last item here is a look forward. We took a look back, so let's take a quick look forward. And this model is prepared by our actuary Chiron. It assumes the 6.5% return on investments annually from 2022 down through 2046. That won't actually happen that way, but on average, we think it should. And you will see that by the time you get to 2028, which is this vertical bar here, you have both the actuarial value of assets as well as the market value of assets, which exceed the actuarial liability. That is when the plan is projected to become fully funded, when that 1996 UAL is paid off. And then if you go to the bottom part of this chart, these are contributions. So the yellow vertical lines are member contributions. Those are flat. And these green vertical lines are the contributions that the state makes to the plan. Once the 1996 UAL is paid off, there will be a very significant drop in what the state will owe. I will point out two things. One, again, this represents the maturing of the plan and the need for us to begin today, and we are planning for an asset allocation that will help to de-risk the plan and to begin making progress towards that before we get to 2029. And then there is also legislation that requires a study for the potential of a new public pension plan for state teachers and state employees that would potentially take advantage of this. And I'm certain that your committee has no shortage of uses for this windfall that will occur in 2029. But I wanted you to see the schematic that goes with it. With that, I'm going to stop screen sharing. Again, your appendix has quite a few different historical views of different aspects of the state teacher plan, as well as some different forward-looking projections, which include what if we had a big downturn in the economy? What if we had another year like we had today, so that you can see there's still a significant drop off. It's just the trajectory is a little bit different. And then for those of you who have an interest in evaluation for the judicial plan, the legislative plan, or the consolidated PLD plan, there are views of the valuation in your appendix as well for that. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. White. And I just want to remind folks on this committee about why we're hearing this today. There was a time when, right now, this system is under the purview of the Labor and Housing Committee, but there was a time during the Great Recession when the fund was struggling that it was moved over temporarily under appropriations. So for instance, when I first was on the committee in the 128th, this the fund was still under the authority of appropriations. In the 129th, it moved back over to Labor and Housing because it's obviously in better shape, and the presiding officers decided to move it back over there. But because it has obviously big impacts on the state budget, it's something that we continue to keep our eye on, and continues to inform the budget, obviously, going forward. So looks like Representative Arata has a question.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. In 2028, will we stop having to pay to pay towards the retirement plan? That won't be in the state budget anymore?
It will be. It will be. So you will continue to pay the normal costs, right?
Okay.
So, and in theory, when you pay the normal costs, you are meeting the costs going forward. But as different things happen, like investment losses, employment, demographic shift, longevity shifts, inflation or deflation that's exceptional happens, future UALs could be created. And we actually, by constitution, we have a 20-year amortization schedule for any new UAL that is created. So in theory, we have an amortization schedule for each year, but that 1996 unfunded liability that the Constitution requires to be paid off was significant, because up until that time, new benefits were granted without paying for them as you went along. And what the legislature has been doing since that constitutional amendment passed is making sure you pay for them when you pass them. And so that's the most significant one. There will be future UALs. You will always have an appropriation line item towards the retirement because of the normal costs. And hopefully we can find a way to de-risk this plan enough that we will keep those future UAL costs in control.
Okay, thank you. I also have another real quick question. I saw in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, pension funds pump more money into private equity. How much are we invested in private equity?
It is significant. So when you go back, I'd have to pull up the exact amount, and I'd be happy to get that to you, Representative Arata. And I'm sorry, you just switched where you were on my screen, so apologies.
That's okay.
You know, if you go back decades, there was a time when we could easily earn 8% or more in pension plans just by investing in bonds. We are not in that kind of economic environment anymore. So in order to get even the returns that we get today, we have to take significant risk, and those are in private equities. And the plan is that I shouldn't use plan. Our goal is, as this plan matures and we approach 2029, we can begin to de-risk that plan, not take the level of risk we've had to in order to get the returns that we have by lowering the returns that we expect to get. And that will put the plan on a better glide path going forward and would reduce some of the investments in private equity, but certainly not all. There's just no way that you're going to get the returns coming into this fund. And I don't believe the state is ready to step up and make up the difference in terms of what those investment returns are bringing in.
Okay, yes, thank you. I'd like to get that information. Do you think we're on par with other states or comparable to other states with regards to private equity? What percent of our fund is in private equity?
And if I can find some information on that, I will get it to you. But private equity is where pension plans have had to go in order to try and get the returns. So, you know, I think back when I was in state government 13 years ago, we were beginning, you know, we were in that place where we were realizing we can't get those 8% returns anymore. And then when I was with the university system as the vice chancellor for finance and admin, we had to start lowering our discount rate. We couldn't achieve those returns even with higher risks. And so we're in a situation now where MEPERS has been lowering over the past number of years the discount rate in order to take less risk. But I'm not sure there's a portfolio plan that exists that wouldn't still have us exposed to some private equity. I do think we have an excellent investment team and an excellent set of advisors that have helped us to choose wisely. The plan today hit an all-time high. So we went over 19 billion today. We've been hovering between 18.5 billion and 18.7 billion for the 4 months that I've been here. And we knew it was a matter of time, but it hit that today. But those won't hold forever, right? We're in an unusual economic environment where market returns have been high and we have been riding that wave. But our focus is really on over time, how do we achieve the discount rate that is planned in order to keep the plan stable? And right now, I think that does require pension plans investing in private equity.
All right, thank you.
Representative Hymanson.
Thank you, and welcome, Dr. Weig. My question is about the divestment, and I appreciate that phrase, the harmonizing fiduciary and the requirements of law. So could you talk a little about the process that you're using to do that?
Absolutely. So we took a proposed approach to our Board of Trustees in November, and they approved it. We convened a divestment advisory panel, and I kind of want to reach out here and grab another document so I can tell you who's on it. Our goal was to put some experts on that plan who have had this experience in other states, in other pension funds, in order so that we could benefit from that experience. And so we looked at California, New York, Connecticut, and we've been able to recruit Brian Rice, who's the portfolio manager at the California State Teachers Retirement System, Deborah Spalding, who's currently the Chief Investment Officer at Common Fund Asset Management, but was previously with the Connecticut Fund, and Elizabeth Gordon, who's the Executive Director of Corporate Governance at New York State Common Retirement Fund, as well as some of our own senior leadership at MEPERS. We just had our first meeting last Friday, and we certainly are gaining an appreciation for how complex and difficult this work will be, and are preparing ourselves that it is probably going to be work that isn't going to be one and done. It's going to be work that evolves over multiple years. What we're hoping the panel will help us do is to identify those issues that we need to study and address. And then once we've identified those issues, we would put them into a request for proposal and seek one or more consultants that would help us develop our approach in order to comply with the divestment legislation, but consistent with our fiduciary duties and sound investment practices, which is the exception that's included in that legislation. Our hope is this work will be completed next fall, so that when our first report is due to the Labor Committee on the divestment legislation, we will be able to fully explain what our approach is and how we are going to go about it. That's all.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Weik? I would ask, you brought up the topic of folks living longer. Can you put that in sort of plainer English, if you would, about like the scope of that and the scale? You know, how much of an impact would that have on the fund? You know, do we need, you know, 10% more money over time? Do we need, like, what's this? Could you just kind of tell me in English what the scope of that challenge is?
I'd be happy to get you the details on that, Senator Breen. And I do have a schematic, which I won't be able to put my hands on quickly, but it essentially shows that if you look at where we are today or where we were in 2020, and you go back 10 years and then you go back 10 years, you will see that the mortality rates have absolutely shifted. People are living longer, and actuaries take that information and run it against what they know our payroll to be, run it against what they know about the demographics of our membership, and use that. And it was of the things that factored into the changes in the actuarial assumptions, longevity was one of the key ones. But I can pull that information together and get that to Maureen to share with the committee.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Weik? All right. I don't see any, so I will thank you so much for putting the presentation together and for making yourself available today. And we look forward to the follow-up information, and I'm sure Maureen will help us track that down. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time, whenever that might be.
All right, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming. So I'm looking to my co-chair and to Maureen. I mean, I think that finishes our work for today. Is that correct?
I believe so, but as always, Maureen knows more. So I think we're done for the day.
And as always, I have nothing to add. I think you are done for the day.
Looks like Representative Cloutier has a question.
So are we going back to the public hearing for Senator Miramont?
No, we're not. I have not heard from Senator Miramont.
But I would point out, and just you probably already have observed, that the two bills regarding bonding are almost identical. So,
but what do we do in terms of the process, Maureen? Should I open the public hearing and close it just so that we actually?
It may not be a bad idea, just so that we can officially say it was done. And I don't believe you had anybody who is signed up to testify for this, right, or submitted testimony. I imagine most of them would say their testimony would cover both bills. So.
Yeah. So I will open the public hearing on LD 339 and see if there are any questions on the bill from any members of the committee. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on LD 339. All right, I believe that is finished. I mean, obviously we're in that position at the beginning of any session where we're waiting for proposal for the budget, the proposed supplemental from the chief executive. I don't have any concrete information about when that will be coming, so I don't have a lot to say or predict about what the committee will be doing until we have that in hand. All right, any questions before we sign off? Okay, well, it's really nice to see all of you. And we don't see you beforehand, we'll see you on the 26th of January for our next session day. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Maureen, and thank you, Judith. Bye-bye.
Bye.